Alright folks, my name is Freyn and today we are finally going to be taking a look at the long-awaited dossier for the Dreadnoughtus. If you've not been keeping up, the Dreadnoughtus will be a brand new creature for the Extinction map once it comes to ARK Survival Ascended, and is the first fully herbivorous vote winner. But that's a long way off of course, as we have many maps to arrive first, but that doesn't stop us poring over the text for clues to speculate on and comparing it to its original submission. So, at long last, what is in that dossier? First off, the creature information. We have a time period of Cretaceous and a diet of herbivore, as we well know. The species is now Dreadnoughtus recalcitrans, which is actually pretty important, and we'll come back to that later. And the temperament is territorial, so it's not fond of things getting all up in its space. But it also won't chase you very far or hunt you down simply for daring to exist. But given its size, if we assume its territory range is relative, then that's still going to leave us with a fairly big range of aggression in the wild. Speaking of which, let's get on to the main text. Dreadnoughtus was a newly described fossil genus in my day, named for the idea that it was so large it must have had nothing to fear in its own time. The current species does its namesake proud, and may even be able to defy the titans ruling our post-apocalyptic world. A big believer in picking on creatures its own size, Dreadnoughtus will ignore anything smaller than a Spinosaur to focus on larger threats. So our submission was stated to be hostile against anything of Rex size or larger, while the dossier here states Spinosaur. Now I'm not actually sure which of those is the bigger in-game, but I'm assuming that, like most creatures with selective targeting, this will be measured in drag weight, and for that both the Rex and the Spino are the same at 550. Which gives us already one tick for the submission comparison. Now this territorial temperament being the inverse of most creatures and ignoring you when riding something small, and especially knowing that the larger tames tend to be the slower ones, I think we're going to start finding Extinction travel preferences are going to be something towards the small end from now on. It absorbs the fury of incoming attacks to charge up its uncanny element-disrupting bellow. Even then, this bruiser shows extraordinary patience, waiting until the last possible moment to come roaring back. Well, with the mention of my favourite feature in the bellow, that's 2 for 2 now. And not just a bellow even, but one charged by damage and one that disrupts element. The entry design suggested tech disruption and corruption weakening, and both of those fall under element, so while this isn't concrete confirmation, to me that's good enough to expect both of those features. And the charging via damage matches exactly as well. One question for me is, does that element disruption affect tech creatures when they eventually arrive? But also remembering this is listed in the wild section of the dossier, we know that this will be potentially used against survivors too if you should try to bring it down. And as for the last possible moment, well, I'm not sure, but perhaps there's bonuses to using it at a certain threshold, or perhaps it simply infers that the meter has a very high upper end, with the effect scaling depending on how much damage you've taken, driving you to really pick your moment for maximum effect, at potential cost of your health being too low to finish the job after. Moving on to the domesticated section now. Once tamed, Dreadnoughtus will gladly shoulder your heaviest artillery and carry it, and you, into battle, on a platform big enough to earn that Dreadnoughtus name. Your walking war machine will swallow boulders or cannonballs to spit back up as acid-coated ammo. Well, that's another round of check marks for the submission there, as despite there being no sketch of the saddle featured, unlike the Shasta, we do have a pretty solid indication that there will be something in a similar vein to the design, with shouldering the heaviest artillery. All platform saddles are able to carry cannons or catapults after all, so for it to be worth mentioning in a limited text space like this, one can only assume that this is a default part of it, rather than simply reminding you that you can put them there. Its acid throat cannon has also made it in, with the addition of boulders to its ammunition options to boot, giving us that big gun-laden battleship-inspired design almost on a one-to-one so far, with only really the harpoon missing in terms of its firepower. If you're going to war with titans, it just makes sense to recruit a titanic creature with a grudge against them. Your Dreadnoughtus ally may go down fighting, but not before softening up the adversary for a killing blow. Best of luck, and give him hell for me. Well, I think overall it measures up pretty well to Dynasty of Dragons' original design. It brings in the large creature aggression, the anti-element roar, the cannon throat, and by the sounds of it, the turret-toting saddle. There are a couple of features that aren't mentioned, such as the Giant Slayer buff or the chest harpoon, but that's not to say they won't be there at all. The single biggest omission from the text though is the taming, with no indication as to how that will occur. As a reminder, the submission used a set of rotating tasks like the massive moss chops demanding help instead of food, but there's nothing of that mentioned here. We do have a couple of further hints for other aspects of it though. The little sketches and symbols show a target marker against the Titans, but a cross against smaller tames. Now this is likely just a little bit of fluff, but when you couple it with the triple ticks on defense and that line of grudge against Titans, perhaps that is a hint towards that Giant Slayer buff after all, simply brought down from being all large creatures into only the bosses. The other major and rather well hidden clue though is that species name, Recalcitrans. The word recalcitrant means defiant against restraint or difficult to manage. And while we haven't got a single hint in the main text about the proposed maintenance mechanic, I cannot imagine they use that name for nothing. Whether it will take the shape suggested is something we will have to wait a long time to see, but this may well be the first creature that has post-tame requirements to keep it happy. Despite the aggression levels of several of the tames we already have in game, none would ever be defined as resistant to authority or hard to control. So I am very curious to see where that goes. The size I personally think we're a bit unknown right now. It was originally pitched a touch smaller than the Titanosaur, and I feel like the concept art isn't really close to that size. But when we look at the Dossier sketch, it shows it standing shoulder to shoulder with the Ice Titan. The Shasta also had a differing size between the two, and it wasn't really a new thing then either, but it does leave us a bit more on the guessing side of things. As for the looks itself, personally, I really like it. I am a little sad it lost the frilled look of the neck, but the patterning looks great, and I have to imagine those neck flaps raise and glow as its roar charges, giving attackers a good indication of its status and allowing for some counterplay to back off before it unleashes the noise. But what do you think? Has this got you excited for Big Dread, or were you hoping for more changes from the submission perhaps? At this stage, these voted creatures have been incredibly accurate to their suggestions, with only really the Fasola featuring heavy changes and the Gigantoraptor going so far as to even copy lines from the Dossier. So whenever we get back to those votes again, it is clear that the design matters more than ever. I have one last little bit of news for you today, which is that we will hopefully be opening a community server for ASA soon, so if you're interested in that, don't hesitate to drop by the Discord and let us know as we discuss the potential options there. But that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you'll consider a like and subscribe if you've enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.